What's in it? Not just Houston.
So welcome everyone to this last meeting of the City Council for 2023. I particularly want to welcome those people who've joined us in live stream. And I also particularly want to welcome Santa Claus, who's joined us on my left-hand side here today, and very glad that he shaved for the occasion, but nice to see him here in place of Michael Morris.
And using Michael's name tag.
So we have apologies from Nobby Clark, who is in Wellington on council business. We also have apologies from Councillor Boyle and also from Evelyn Cook. And we have a apology for leaving early from Alex Crackett, who I think, Alex, you're leaving at 5 p.m. Is that right?
Just after. Yep.
Just after 5 p.m. Okay, thank you. We have no one on Zoom today. We have no one on public forum. We have two major late items.
Move the apologies.
Sorry, will someone move that we receive apologies? Thanks, Grant, and seconded, Barry. Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have two major late items. We have the first one, which will be heard in public, which is the recommendation from Finance and Project Committee. The reason that was not on the agenda is that it came to hand after the publication of the agenda. But will someone move that we receive those minutes?
Yeah.
Or that we are able to receive those minutes? Thank you, Alex.
Second.
Second. Thank you. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We also have a second major late item, which will be heard in public excluded, which is in respect to the D Street Hospital site. The reason that that's not on the agenda, the item came to hand after the publication of the agenda. And the reason it's been held in public exclusion is for reasons of commercial confidentiality in accordance with section 7.2b2 of the Local Government Act.
Move that we accept the late item.
Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So we turn now to the agenda, and I note that we have 1,350 pages to work through. So if we got a fair old clip of 1 minute per page, we should be finished by lunchtime tomorrow. So I hope everybody's brought their sandwiches with them. We will try to go a bit faster than that. So the first item, the minutes of the Connected Murihiku Joint Committee meeting held on Monday, the 20th of November. Will somebody move that we receive those?
Yeah, I can.
Second one.
Yeah. Seconded, Alex. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
We have the minutes of the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting held on the 21st of November.
Move those.
Seconded.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have the minutes of the meeting of council held on 28th November. Will someone move that we receive those?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you, Grant. Seconded, Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have minutes of the Community Wellbeing Fund Subcommittee meeting held on the 30th November. I would normally ask Trish to move those, but Alex was there, so Alex, if you move those. Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 5th of December, and also a recommendation from that, but we'll take the two separately. Rangi, but if you would
I'll move the minutes, and I'll also move at the same time that council adopt the updated draft privacy policy as in the recommendation.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Will you second both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on the policy recommendation? And if not, then all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have the minutes of the Creative Community Scheme.
I'll move those pro forma.
Pardon?
I'll move them pro forma. That was an apology for the meeting there.
Okay. So moved and pro forma by Darren, because there actually is no one here who was at that meeting. Will someone second?
On the same basis, yes.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour of receiving those minutes pro forma?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. So we have the minutes of the hearing for the Queen's Park reclassification held on the 12th of December.
I'll
And
move
chaired.
those are received.
Thank you. Will someone second that?
Okay.
Thank you, Ria. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We have the minutes of the Community Wellbeing Committee meeting held on the 12th of December, and I will take these two matters separately. Dan, will you move the minutes
Yep.
received?
I'll second.
Thank you, Grant. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We have a recommendation from that meeting which goes to item 9.1 to 7. Do you wish to move those down?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Really, council is in two options when it gets to that point, to either receive them or reject them and start the process again.
Yeah.
A second.
So the wording of 4 is to agree that if the objections are not accepted, so there is by implication a choice in the way that it's worded.
Well, the recommendation of the committee was that the objections were not accepted.
Okay, so can we reword that point 4? I think it's quite accurate the way that if we are going to move and accept it. Because if we,
The objections, so it should read, the objections were not accepted for the following reasons.
Take out the word.
We'll just take out the word if.
Take out the word. Oh, take out the word if.
yeah. Okay.
Because that's.
You happy with that, Jeremy?
And the it is,
It is,
And the it is.
the it is needs to come out as well, and then it's accurate.
To agree that the objectives were not accepted for the following reasons.
yep,
That's what we recommended. Yeah.
Yeah.
good to go.
Good to go.
So everybody happy with wording as it now is?
Yeah.
Yep.
It might just point out, actually point in case, well, everybody will have read it, but the point 5 A, that we now have the authority as council to approve that without separately having to go to Department of Conservation. That's right,
Yes,
Dan,
yep.
isn't it? Yes. Okay. So I think we had a move in the second.
We did. We just need them to confirm that they're happy with that
Confirm with
change.
the changes, yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
So on the basis of that, we're taking points 1 to 7 at the same time. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We have the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of council held on 12th of December. Will someone move that we receive those?
Yep.
Thank you, Grant. Is there a second there?
1 second.
Thank you, Ria. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So we have a temporary road closure proposal next. And Doug, you're here to speak to that. Normally these would go to the infrastructure committee first, wouldn't they? Was it a timing reason for?
Not at all. No, I couldn't explain why it's here.
Okay,
It's a timing reason, Mr. Chair. Otherwise, it would have to go to
it's
infrastructure.
a timing reason.
This is, I think, due before the infrastructure committee is meeting on the 23rd of January.
I see. Okay, that explains it.
Fine.
Okay, Doug, well, obviously, I think the paper pretty much speaks for itself, but please, you know, if you wish to summarise.
It certainly does. I just think we can take the report as read. It's a good use of new infrastructure. To be fair, it's what it's there for. So, yeah, I would support this wholeheartedly.
Are there any questions of Doug?
No, I'm happy to move the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm happy to
well,
second.
there's a question, I think, from
But-
Alan.
Sorry, I had a question.
Oh, you had a question? No.
In moving it, is just some feedback from recently around the fact that we're not getting as many of these events in Esk Street as we were hoping for. They seem to be happening quite regularly in Don Street. Partially, I think I can answer the question by partially going it's around Hospo, which isn't necessarily an Esk Street thing, but I mean the automatic bollards are on Esk Street for a reason, so we could.
So who makes that the decision is that the event organiser, or do we make the decision whether it's going to be in one or the other?
It's by request.
The event organiser and
Yeah.
Great South.
Okay, so presumably if we wish to, we could encourage them to look at estuary, but I don't know whether that's a general view. Is it your view, Dan?
It was simply some feedback that I received after there was a road closure granted for Esk Street. A comment made by a couple of councillors.
Hmm.
I mean,
Is it a-
everybody wanted it closed off to be a mall, so.
Yeah. Ria, do you want to comment on that?
I think the concern was if it was on East Street, that it would compete with our retailers too close to them. The preference was Don Street.
What, there's no food
What?
retailers in Don Street, are you telling me?
No, I'm not. So it's not my wording. It's what the public have come back and said. That,
I think
that the competition was for the food holders in East Street. That was too close for their businesses, whereas Don Street was kind of over that way, would allow more food trucks and things like that. That's
I'm
just what.
thinking of
That's
half
just
of Don
feedback.
Street's being full of hospo,
It's what, sorry?
full of hospitality, restaurants and bars.
Okay, so look, I think it's, I mean, on the one hand, you could say it's best left to the event organiser to know which is best for them. I think if we see a trend emerging that we're uncomfortable with, then we can always go
Yeah,
back and
sure.
encourage them
Yeah.
to think again. Alan?
Well, same thing, and my question is that Don Street, I mean, Esk Street's been designed for this type of thing. And to be fair, like the shops are shut at 5 to 9, but there's actually people that are residents who can't get access to where they live in Don Street. It just makes no sense to me, and they keep on using my car park and occasionally my toilets in our building that we have down Don Street, and I won't allow that again. So I just don't know why they don't do it on Esk Street.
Okay.
You
thanks.
got toilets, you got everything, everything's there. And as a as a retailer in that area myself, I welcome more. I don't think it's not a threat to us.
Yep.
It's an advantage.
Rangi, do you want to speak to the same subject? Or?
Yeah, obviously you read the news, New Year's Eve, Don Street is the place to be. It's the same thing, there's a massive, obviously the road's closed.
It's a car park.
It's a car park one, is it?
Yep.
Right, but again, it doesn't actually say that as a car park, but maybe in the fine print.
It's in the Don Street car park I signed the liquor licence for.
Right, okay, right, Don Street car park isn't
The Wilson's, former Wilson's one that's now ICC. The one next to the Langlands.
next to the Langlands. Okay, cool. None of the other streets closed off. No. Okay, but obviously, again, Don Street, good spot with the hospo. Yeah.
Okay, Leslie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to contribute that it has been obvious at the other Don Street events that the Esk Street retailers, food retailers, have been quite happy to have signs out suggesting that people might like to also visit Esk Street. It doesn't sound to me like they're particularly thinking there's competition, and we're obviously getting the indication that there's some preference for the other events of this nature to be in Esk Street, so I think it is well worth investigating that happening more regularly in Esk Street. It was what we all thought was going to happen.
Alex?
Pretty much what Leslie said. I think this is a really quick and easy fix, very simple conversation. Hey, we would just like to see more happen in Esk Street as well. Can you give us a calendar of what that's going to look like over the next 12 months? Everything's fixed.
Okay, Michael?
You need no traffic management.
Yeah, through self-chair, I'm happy to take it on board and take that back to the event organisers, because that is part of the city activation component, and that is something we can give an indication back to Great South about how we would like the events to go forward from a council perspective, and just working through what that balance is going forward. So I can get something on that to come back to council in the new year.
Okay, thank you. So, given that qualification, are people happy to, is somebody happy to move that?
Yep.
Thank you, Dan. Somebody second?
Yeah, I can second that.
Thank you, Grant. So we're moving all three recommendations that are on page 83 of board books. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Okay. Alan, I mean, you don't have to give a reason, but is it because of the Don Street side?
Yeah, just
Okay then, thank you. It's just
to
so
show
that
my disapproval.
it's just so we understand.
I think, you need traffic management in Don Street. You don't need traffic management in Esk Street.
Yeah.
There's money to be saved.
Okay, so I mean, I think we're probably at that point, and Michael's going to take it up. So,
Yeah,
but I understand the reason you're doing it. Okay, thank you. So that we then move to the elected and appointed members attendance register for the period to, when's it start? Is it June to December or?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, for the second half of the year, basically.
Move it's received.
Second.
Hello.
Yeah, I think let's have questions. So.
Yeah.
Alex,
Back when we last had this come forward, we had the discussion about how I put my apology forward to the mayor and it wasn't recorded.
Yeah.
I'm still, for that month that I was away in Europe, still recorded here as DNA when I had put in my apology. So that hasn't been changed since we had that discussion last time this paper came forward. And the same for Infrastructure Committee. Literally the paper that we just moved earlier that records my apology away for being away on council business for Young Elected Members Network. I'm recorded as an apology rather than away for local government. So I just, every time this comes up, there's discrepancies.
I know, and I think I don't know if it was the last time it came up or the time before, Michael, but I certainly remember at one stage, I asked, I was sitting over there, I asked if we could perhaps distribute a draft version a couple of weeks before, so that people could check it and correct or comment or. So I think if we could maybe start that process, Michael, I think that'd be very helpful. Actually.
Thank you. I absolutely take that on board and apologise, Councillor Crackett. We should have corrected that. I'm not sure why that hasn't been done. I will take that on board and make sure that it is done. And yes, I think circulating a draft in advance is helpful for everybody. But as ever, if there are apologies that you believe we have missed on this, please send them through to me, and we can get them corrected. And I will circulate a corrected one early in the new year.
I think there's, I mean, this is obviously it's just a record of who's been where, but it's a historical document, and therefore, I think important that what is actually received and approved is as accurate as we can make it. So what I'm inclined to do, Michael, is, I don't know if that's the right words, is leave it at the table, but I think if you bring it back next time, having had the opportunity for members to come back and say, hey, look, this is wrong, or, I'm sure I said whatever, so that we get it right before we receive it.
Very comfortable with that on that basis, Mr. Chair, and also note the recommendation there is to receive the attendance register July 2023. That should have been December 2023. That is a discrepancy. Clearly, it's nearly the end of the year. I beg your indulgence and apologise, and we will bring it back refreshed, ready to go in January.
So Santa, I want a special Christmas present before I get here.
Just one more thing. Could you put our names at the top of every page?
Yes, I was going to say that too, Alan.
It's very,
Yeah, because when you look at it in iPad,
absolutely,
you actually have to count along the rows to find your name. It's really quite awkward.
You also don't want to sit down at the table going through months and months and months of historic minutes to double check whether or not you were, it's a frustrating process.
So I think we've agreed that we leave this paper on the table. Mike can bring it back next time. In the meantime, if there's any value in leaving it on the table, it is that people will actually check their columns and be satisfied. When it comes back next time, we just have to assume that any corrections that people have already been made, and we'll receive it next time it comes. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So that takes us to the paper that takes up 1,100 pages or 1,200 pages of the agenda. So I don't know if even I want to say welcome Rhiannon. It's an extremely dense paper, but I mean that in the nicest way.
I will take that in good part.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just before you start, can I just summarise where I understand that we are, Rhiannon, and you can just correct me for the benefit of members. So I think this is a culmination of a long-term plan and budget process that started a year ago. And since we started that process, we've had about 25 meetings, I think. we started with effectively a blank sheet, and we considered what was desirable, what was essential, and what was affordable. And what we've tried to narrow the choices down to are those things which are highest priority and based on highest priority and affordability. Now, as I understand it, this is the penultimate stage of the exercise, in that once we have approved this paper, that then forms the basis of what goes to auditors in the middle of January. The auditors pretty quickly actually turn that around, and by the time of the January council meeting, we see it again, this time with the benefit of the comments by the auditors. And at that point, when we approve it, hopefully at that point, that is actually the last time we see it. Have I described accurately where we are in the process?
Almost, yeah. So
Right.
this paper and the next one on this agenda is the culmination, you're absolutely correct, of all the council's work over the last year. So I do apologise for the length of the agenda, but it is all of the work that's been done around this table and through the whole business in terms of pulling that direction into bringing to you all the materials that the auditors need to see. The auditors will be here, assuming that we stay on the same track, and I'll speak to that shortly also, for 5 weeks. So we will come back with the consultation document plus all the supplementary material for adoption for consultation on the current timeline at the end of February. You will unfortunately see it all again fortunately or unfortunately, in the long-term plan document itself, which follows the second audit. So that you will see it again in February and then again in June for the adoption of the long-term plan document itself. So all of these are, if you want to think of it in this way, there are the raw materials that will form first the consultation document and materials, and then the LTP document itself.
Okay, so the from here on in, our council's view will be advised by auditors' comments and then advised by the consequence of consultation. But today we are trying to finalise the input, and we probably don't get another opportunity after this.
This is the last stage before audit, but
Yeah.
there is opportunity for further adjustments through January and February as required, and is directed by council. And ultimately, you take
Based on the auditors' comments. and
based on
also
auditors'
consultation.
advice, and then obviously we consult, but ultimately you take the advice of the community and then make the decision that you believe is best through the long-term plan. So there are 2 more decisions points.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to get everybody on the same page on just where we are in this process. So now, if you want to take us through the paper, then I'll leave you to do that. This is a very dense paper. I don't want to try to hurry it too much, because I think there are some discussion points that we have to have. So I suggest you do just work through it point by point.
Okay, so then Chair, if it's okay with you, what I might do is start with just some minor corrections and an addition of a proposed recommendation, and then provide an update on the latest advice we have around the audit process, because I think that it's relevant to this paper, and then work through the rest of the paper. Does that work for you? So Michelle, I think you have the text for the corrections. The first corrections are on recommendation 4, and they are due to further budgeting information that became available this week. So that's just a correction. There's 2 corrections. The first correction in option 1 is relating to just where we're at in terms of finishing the rating model. The rating model is always the last thing to get finished. So we just want to signal that it is expected to be around 0.5%. It may be slightly lower than that. On option 2, that is a incorrect statement that just needed to be fixed. It will remain at 212 units. And then the other correction to the paper is the request for an addition of a further resolution at the end of the paper, which is in regard to the latest ministerial advice we have had regarding Three Waters regulatory plans for regulatory change. So if possible, Chair, to speak briefly to that now.
Want to delete or do we want to delegate?
Yeah, the C is getting deleted.
Yes, that should be delegate, not delete.
Just like
I
a
hope that's
career
my
path,
topo, Michelle,
Amazing
not
what
you.
can slip through.
It'll be autocorrect.
Okay, so it's appeared already, so no, the Ministry of the change.
So,
Document. Okay, is everybody happy with the addition of that number 17? Okay.
so, Chair, with your direction, perhaps it makes sense to speak to point 17 first and then work through the rest of the paper. Are you happy with that approach?
Sure.
Yeah. So we've just had advice through on how the new government intends to deal with the issue of timing around the regulatory changes that they're intending to make in the area of Three Waters and the stage that we're all at in the long-term planning process. So the Department of Internal Affairs is working on the draft legislation at this point, which is intended to go through Parliament in January and early February. So there will be a crossover period where there is essentially a legal point where it's unclear what direction. There are two pieces of legislation, one that's here at the moment and one which will be coming, and the auditors, they legally must audit what is there, not what is coming. So that's the advice that we're speaking to at this point. So essentially the government appears to be taking a direction of trying to provide as many options as possible for councils to take, so recognising that everybody is in a different situation in terms of Three Waters and what it means to the council operations and the approach they've taken to planning to the long-term plan. So you'll recall, councillors, that all the way through the long-term planning process we have been taking a parallel planning approach in basically anticipating that should there be a change in government we may need to pivot. So we believe in a fairly strong position to respond in this situation. Essentially, Patricia and the team have modelled all the budgets with Three Waters in. Erin and her team have been planning in terms of what they anticipate they would be able to deliver, and as you'll know through the conversations that we've all been having, we've been anticipating we would be talking to the community about what would need to be done in Three Waters, irrespective of who would actually deliver that. So we are in a good position given the options that the government is putting forward. So essentially they are saying that they anticipate post the legislation change that all disclosures required in the long-term plan should revert to the Local Government Act as it states at 2021. So we believe we're in a position to do that in terms of our Three Waters program. There are choices in front of us in terms of how we approach the LTP process. So the first choice is we can go with the standard procedure and we can follow all of the normal audit stages and consultation stages and proceed to the delivery date which is required for the rate strike of 30th of June 2024. That would, as I've just outlined before, require two audit processes, the audit of the consultation document and then following consultation, the audit of the long-term plan itself. There is a second choice, which the government is saying we can make, which is no audit of the consultation document. So they're introducing that option to allow a smooth process, knowing that there's complexity in front of all of us in terms of what Three Waters means, whether it's in or out. They are advising that we should negotiate with the auditors around a parallel process of consultation and audit to ensure that we are in good time in order to adopt.
Rhiannon, just to be clear there, when you say no audit of the consultation document, you mean in respect to Three Waters specifically?
No audit at all.
No, but no audit of any consultation.
No audit of the consultation document, essentially removing the first stage of the LTP audit entirely, that is an option in front of us. And then they're saying in order to ensure that the audit, which is normally much shorter of the long-term plan itself, can proceed in time, that we would need to start the audit in parallel with consultation. So that is one option.
Alex?
Is that likely to result in less audit fees for us? Is it possible to quantify how much?
Would certainly be something we would discuss, but we don't have that information at this point.
So the question posed by number 17 then, is that question that the chief executive may be allowed to make the decision about which of those two options we follow?
I haven't, there's more options. Shall I finish outlining the options? Okay, so then the next option is to defer adoption no later than the 30th of September 2024. And that is particularly available for councils that are not in a position to swiftly move to Three Waters Inn. And if we did choose that option, then the annual report would also be deferred and would be adopted by the end of December. The next option is that for those councils which have planned purely for the status of under the current legislation as it stands, they can go out and consult with no Three Waters, and then they can add Three Waters in as best they can ahead of adoption of the long-term plan. And finally, the last option is if we started with Three Waters in, which is currently legislatively not correct, they are intending to write into the new legislation that neither our LTP nor rates made in reliance will be invalid if we consult on that basis. So there's a number of different options in front of us. We are in the position to respond and pivot in the direction that makes most sense for this council. We are probably in quite a strong position compared to most other councils around that. And until we've had the conversations with the auditors, and this is why we're requesting a delegation to Michael, we're not in a position to discuss the things like Councillor Crackett's raising around audit fees, which are important to consider, but also the whole timeline and delivery, because there are certainly benefits for the rest of council business. The longer the long-term plan goes on, the more staff resource it takes from other things. So there are certainly benefits to staying on track in terms of the time frame.
So it's obviously I personally support the number 17, and I think we'll get to that in a minute. But what it seems to me is that for the past 12 months, we, in terms of both council and officers, have worked very, very hard to get to the point that we have, and we have thought through, I think correctly, what might happen at this juncture and what the options are, and we've probably chosen the correct option in terms of the likeliest. I mean, I would be, and I'm not trying to take a decision away from Michael, it's Michael's decision when he thinks about the broadest implications. But to be honest, I just want to keep the momentum going. That would be, my view. Let's not do anything that puts in jeopardy the risk that we've got to go back over a whole lot of stuff that we've just done over the past 12 months. Michael? Yeah.
Through yourself, Chair. The reason we need this delegation in place is because we need to work through with audit what that would look like. Audit, if they begin in their normal process, which would be the middle of January, would be audit if they were to audit the consultation document as it stands. That would be, from their perspective, not compliant with legislation, and that would be the tack they would have to take, because that is the requirement. They have to take the current legislation into account. So we would need to work through with them so they can get confidence through their audit process into the final documentations that end up going through into our LTP. So they will be doing that as part of that process to validate numbers and detail in relation to that. But they cannot give us an audit opinion on the consultation, because they would be auditing it at a time when legislation's not confirmed.
Okay, Leslie?
Thanks, Chair. Just backing up Michael, considering the timing, we're now in December, and the timing of any new legislation. This is the most practical resolution we could pass. So to me, it's a practical matter.
Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, we need to keep the momentum going, would be my view, to the best that we can, given the constraints of the law. So let's take number 17 then. Will somebody move that we approve that? Thank you, Rhian. Seconded by Barry. Is there any further discussion of that point? If not, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. So we're in your hands now, Rihanna.
Right, okay, so I'll move back up then to recommendation 2. So you'll recall that at the October council meeting you confirmed the majority of the budget directions, and those have been taken and have been moved through into the asset and activity plans and the financial impact statements. Following the workshop on the 7th of December, a number of matters were discussed, and these are provided now for your consideration and direction. So do you want me to go through them, or I know some councillors were not present at the workshop. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that there are, although we traversed all of those items at the workshop, of course, there were no decision made respect to those. We just talked about them, and I think there was various views amongst councillors. So I think it is appropriate to go back, and we will have to take each of those items individually, I think, in terms of agreeing or disagreeing with the point. I suspect that's going to take up a fair proportion of the time, but I think we need to do it that way, Rhiannon. So let's work through those items, starting with A.
Okay, so the first item is a capital expenditure item that was simply missed from the earlier stage in the earlier budget process. So that's an apology from our team that it just didn't come up to you at the right point. So that's $1 million of capital expenditure next financial year for changing room improvements. That's unisex toilets and changing rooms at Splash Palace, and that's in response to identified need in terms of the changing rooms not being large enough to meet all the needs of the community. And so hence this recommendation.
Thank you. Grant.
Yeah, how has the $1 million been arrived at?
So that has been arrived at with the property team. I'm not sure, Erin, if you have any more specifics that you wish to share.
The number that's been put in there was arrived at through the work that the PMO have done in collaboration with RCP as their advisors on building maintenance and deferred maintenance for the building.
But it's capital expenditure, isn't it?
It's not maintenance.
It's capex for the changing shed.
It's a split 70% capital, 30% OPEX, which is an estimate. It really depends on how the building holds together.
Any other questions on that item? I must admit, taking the implication of Grant's question, it does seem an extraordinary large amount of money, and it's hard to imagine that's the cheapest way of providing, a small number of toilets. Alex?
May I suggest, Chair, that we continue going through the rest of the list, because we've already had, like many of these discussions before in the workshops, and this one has sort of just been sprung on us, so it will allow everybody some time to percolate as to what that could look like while we continue.
We did discuss it at workshop, but not everybody was here. Michael?
Just for some clarity on the changing room, it's extending outside of its current footprint, and that's hence why you have the dollar figure attached to it, because as it currently stands, it's not with it a reconfiguration just within the site. You actually need to extend out onto the north boundary slightly to create the capacity to be able to have those changing rooms within there. So and unisex toilets.
So if I ask the question another way, are the officers comfortable that's a robust number for that capital project?
It's an indication of I have to be honest. At the moment, you go with a project at this stage. It is an estimate that has come through. It's at that stage. It's still in your plus and minus perspective because they need to do the detailed design component. But it is a rough estimate of what it would cost.
I would be happy to pick up Alex's suggestion that we keep that one to a little bit later in the discussion. I think we'll find as we go through these that some of them we can approve very quickly and easily, and there'll be other ones that are a little bit more contentious, and it may be better that we keep those to the end and talk about those then. Actually, Rangi had his question.
Look, to me, this is quite simple. Staff have put forward $1 million budget. They've obviously thought about it. They wouldn't put it here. They haven't got a roulette wheel they spin around. So I have full confidence that the $1 million has absolute meaning, and I don't know why we're even talking about it.
Well, we're talking about
somewhere.
We're talking about because we still have to agree or disagree that should be in the budget. It's not only a matter of whether it's $1 million or 900,000 or 1.1. It's whether we approve it at all. So, Leslie.
Mr. Chair, could I concur with Councillor Crackett that perhaps we should go through B to G and then come back to whether or not we can agree to all of them, or whether we're then going to pick out any of them. It just seems that would move it forward a bit more. As one of the councillors who wasn't there, I've done a bit of looking into the changing room situation, and I consider the $1 million to be a reasonable proposition. But let's work through the others and then see if everybody's in agreement that we can.
So let's do that. So Rhiannon, B.
So B is put forward following the direction from Council to the executive leadership team to look for ways in which we may make savings. This was one of the areas identified. The pilot actually completed in between the first report and the second, so we now are confident we can deliver that program for $100,000 less.
So how does, so questions? Anybody have any questions? Rangi.
This makes absolute sense. It was really a trial when we approved this way back, the 300. They've obviously tried it, found they can do it for 200. Makes sense.
Okay, so sounds as though that's going to get the nod. C.
C again is that further work was able to be done as those projects that relate to Project 1225 come further to completion. Those operational budgets for maintenance have been able to be completed with greater accuracy, obviously reflecting that those buildings are new, and so maintenance costs across the first 10 years, that is a combined figure, not an annual figure, to be really clear. It's a combined figure across those three facilities, a 10-year saving of $850,000.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Comments? Okay, C. Oh, no, we've done C. D.
D is around the direction that Council had in discussion at that workshop, that the general consensus was that 150,000 was the appropriate amount for a pump track. The earlier paper Council did confirm funding at 250,000. It is the advice of officers that external funding will need to be sought for the project to proceed. So hence bringing this recommendation back to you to adjust that figure down as required.
May I ask, I thought that the last pump track that we did cost 120,000, didn't it? Is that the case? And just wonder why this one is a lot more expensive.
Okay.
Just a couple of things to you, Mr. Chair. Noting this is 2026, 2027. So there is some discussion around that through the team that I've heard. And I would say that it's not, rather than just noting that external funding will be required, it should be subject to external funding, because it won't be able to be achieved if it isn't. So it's going to be subject to external funding at that price.
So we will put in the budget then 150,000, and the expectation is not quite the right word, and hope that actually that the job can be done for that and somewhat. But if it cannot, then we're going to rely on external funding, or else we're going to have to cut our suit to suit the cloth. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we put 150. I think that's where we probably are. Okay. E. It's an interesting one.
Item E is, again, there's a timing issue in terms of this work needing to be done for the LTP ahead of the detailed paper that the committee will receive on this project specifically. So the council had given direction for asking what would need to be done to make this building safe to be being used over the short term, noting the indication that potentially in the medium term an alternative location for council's administration building might be found. So this is providing information around the remaining 15.4 million capital that would be spent between 2024 and 25 and 2028 and 29. This is as for deferred maintenance works, deferred building life systems, heating, ventilation and cooling, lighting, electrical and fire, and ongoing project costs to enable this building to be safely occupied for the first 5 years of the long-term plan.
Questions for Rhiannon? Grant.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, obviously. Are we putting good money up the bed, I suppose, is what I'm trying to factor into my head. Yeah, it's a lot of money. Not saying the work doesn't need done, but we've started a process of looking at alternative options, haven't we? So are we spending money twice is my concern, probably.
I think I'll just speak briefly to the process and then pass it to the GM of infrastructure. It's important to make an allocation in the budget at this point in order for the rating model to be finished and audit to start. We are recognising though that this is coming ahead of the detailed paper that you will get. It can be changed through the audit process. So I'll pass to you, Erin.
I think the first thing I'd say is we won't be making any efforts to try to spend that money. Often we will try to expend our money, but this is one where we won't be attempting proactively to spend the money. I think the key piece is, to Rhiannon's point, we're still working through that process around what our future looks like for our building. What we do know, though, is that regardless of whether it's a refurbishment of this building, another building that we build just for us, whether we go into another building with another partner, either way, that $15.4 million is going to be the absolute bare minimum amount that we'll need in that first 10 years. So I think, to Rhiannon's point, it would be remiss of us if we didn't have a figure of at least that in the long-term plan to be able to give us some position around setting rates.
Okay, Rangi.
So sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go?
Yeah, well, just so if I think I heard you right there, so it may be that if things progress on an alternative option, that money's set aside and would then just sit within another bucket in effect.
That's right. We do have an allocation to have to spend money to keep the lights on in this building, and we'll have to spend what it takes to do that. But in terms of, we're not looking to proactively be prettying up this building. We would absolutely be looking to potentially move this money to a future project the moment we decide what that project is.
And the start spend of that would be 24, 25, so we're 12 months away from that. Is that how I read the numbers?
That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
Rangi.
So reading this literally, it says the 15.4 is to allow us to safely occupy the building for the first 5 years of the LTP. So after 5 years, what do we do then? Because obviously we're back in the same position we are now. That's the way I read it. Literally, we're back where we are today. So in 5 years' time, are we going to be sitting here, or whoever's around the table, what are we going to do now? Because obviously it's no longer safe again, or it's otherwise it should say for the next 10 years or whatever or something. But it says 5 years. So that's the bit I'm a bit confused about. Am I reading it literally right?
I think the discussion, were you at the workshop on the 7th of December?
I can't
No,
remember,
I don't
can't
remember if you were. But I think the discussion there was that we would, it would, if we were to decide that we were going to build another building, let's just suppose, then by the time we got all the necessary approvals and consents and we actually built the thing, it would probably be a period of 5 years. So you've probably got 5 years in this building anyway. So that's where the number 5 years came from.
Well, shouldn't you actually use the time period that your actual what you're doing will last? So if the air conditioning is going to last 10 years, when you say that, and if the other lighting is going to last longer than 10 years, wouldn't you actually say that? It just gives the impression that we're doing a 5-year fix, and after that, I mean, that's the way I read it. That's why I asked: is it literally saying what it says?
So well, let's have a go, Darren. We'll go around the table and then we can come back.
Thanks, Chair. No,
and I will.
Aaron made the point I was going to raise.
Pardon?
Aaron made the point I was going to raise.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Rhiannon?
I was just going to speak to the reasoning for the wording so that you could inform the discussion around any adjustment. So putting this wording together with Lee, obviously with his expertise in the PMO office, it reflects two things. It reflects the years across which the budget was allocated, which was at council direction that you wished to understand what would be necessary to keep this building operational while an alternative was sought. And secondarily, it signals that there may be further work that would be necessary beyond that point, should the choice be made to then inhabit this building for longer. There will be more detail that will come through from the PMO in the paper, but it was speaking very directly to the direction that was given to the team from council as to what you wished to receive. Now, I'll just clarify that to say that is not to assume either that, as Councillor Pottinger has said, that you would be writing off assets in some way after 5 years. That's not what it's intended to suggest. Neither is it intended to suggest that at the end of 5 years there would definitely be further funding that would need to be spent. It is quite specific to the direction that was given by council.
Thank you. Leslie, you
Thanks, Mr. Chair. To some extent, Rhiannon said what I was going to say. It seemed to me that it's put in for a very specific 5-year financial year period for the reasons specified. Within that time, council will have come to a conclusion about the future of this building or any other proposal that may be being worked on that doesn't include this building, and that anything that is spent in that meantime would be useful for the future life of this building if it was not to be a council occupied building. But it seems to me we have to make the provision. I think since the time I have been on council, we have had a number of discussions about the issues with this building as a place for our staff to be housed, and indeed to some extent for our council to be housed. And there are basic tasks put in quite clearly here that need to be done, and need to be done urgently if we're going to occupy this building for a longer period. And we've had the discussion about the first 5 years of the long-term plan realistically being 5 years in which we would not have a new building built if the decision was made to go that way. It just seems to me we need to make the practical allocation if we're going to be realistic about living in this building for longer and asking our staff to live in this building.
Okay. Grant, did you have another comment? A question?
No. Oh, well, I was just going to sort of clarify Rangi's question around, you know, that if you spend your 15 million, you don't want to just spend it because of the 5 years. You know, it's going to have a longer view. So is the time frame right
To extend it.
Why are we limiting it to 5 years?
Yeah. Sorry, Rhiannon, you were trying to get in.
Oh, just to, through you, Chair, in response to that question, I guess what the PMO is signalling is if you extend beyond that point, they will have further work to do, and there may well be further budget that would be required, and they don't know that at this point. But what they can do give you is a fairly good confidence on the 15.4 across the first 5 years, which is what they were asked.
I think I have, if I can comment, I think I have two issues with this. I'm not going to debate the 15.4 million. I think that's, you know, a number that's obviously comes from arithmetic, adding up all the work that needs to be done to the building. But two comments. The first is that the more we spend in this building, the harder it's going to be to make a choice to go somewhere else. So if we invest $15 million in this building, so that the additional cost that's required to make it long term save us another 10 million, just for argument's sake, that was a far more likely decision to be taken than deciding to, you know, build a completely new building. So it makes it, the more we spend, the harder it becomes to decide to do something else. The second comment I would make is that we are hopefully going to be in a position within the course of the next financial year to have a preference for what we want to do. I think I'm looking at Ern as I say this because Lee's not here. That we would have, say, by the end of next financial year, we would have looked at the options, know whether we're likely to have anybody want to join us in those buildings, and we would have decided maybe in a location and got some. So I would hope that by the end of next financial year we'd be at that point. That would bring me to a point saying that in the next financial year, until that decision is taken, that we should minimise the spend in 2024, 2025, and not make any commitments which are the larger items during that period. So I know, for example, if we decide to change out the windows, do the work necessary in the windows, that is a very large part of that 15.4 million. Right? So maybe you would park that project until the end of next financial year till you had a better idea which way you want to go. So that if I look at the distribution of the 15.4, my own view would be that over 5 years, that it might be a little bit of hockey stick rather than a straight line. Hockey stick in the sense that it's a little bit back-ended in years 3 to 5. Michael, you were going to say something.
Through yourself, Chair. What I'd like to highlight, and you're quite right about it, the timing in relation to some of this is pushed to later in the period. The work that you're talking about here is to allow us to continue to occupy the building during that time frame. In some of the cases, should that work not be engaged, there'll be a larger operating cost associated to not being in the building. Just want to highlight that because the things that we're talking about are to keep staff in the building. And that's the only cost that's been included in that 15.4 is to get us through that 5 year period from that perspective. Yes, when you do those replacement costs, there is a longer life to those assets, but you can't patch. We're at the stage that's not patch anymore. We actually have to do the work to actually replace those things, and that comes at a cost. So it's not strictly an investment from that perspective because you're only trying to limp it through for a life, but now it's got to the stage it's quite a high cost to limp it through for that particular time frame. We are actively looking at it to go, what do we have to do as opposed to what do you want to do. It's more now, what do we have to do to get it through to that 5 years? And that's the indication that we're put in there to get through that period. This is what we're indicating we believe we're going to need to spend to get to that time frame, which is within that time frame we will hopefully have a decision in relation to what is that next stage, and also hopefully have worked on an action plan to say at the end of the 5 years we're not in the building from that perspective, or we're in a renovated building. So it's kind of saying that that is a cost that to get us to that point. If we can spend less, we would quite openly try and do that. But
so what about the? I mean, I don't know how it's spread through the 5 year period at the moment. I don't know if it's straight line, but the how about the notion of avoiding any large projects during the first year until we make the decision.
Well, that's what the time frame says, though, doesn't it? Because I think, in effect, with the 24-25, you're not doing anything for the first next year.
There's very little in 24-25 and 25-26. Most of it is in the latter periods, but there is a small portion in those periods.
Mixed up with the dates.
Well, we've got to keep the show on the road, so I mean, but I just think that if we were to decide, say, next year to replace the windows, I know that what you told me, it's a very large amount of money just for the scaffolding, and then, so I think about half the total cost is the windows. And once you fire the start gun in that project, you don't want to stop it halfway through. Right. So it's that's the sort of thing that I would say you'd back end. That's where the hockey stick comes. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay. So, any other questions on that issue, on that matter? I'll get to Alex.
Look, I think when I was going to speak on it, everybody else has sort of jumped in and said what I was going to say, but really just wanted to reinforce that we have health and safety obligations to employees, not necessarily us ourselves, but as governors, but through our CE. And they're really indicating to us that literally just to keep the lights on, this is what we have to do. The fact that also that the impact that it would have on the community if we actually had to close the front doors downstairs would be pretty catastrophic, or even just have to relocate. Like I think it's pretty critical at the moment that we just get on and do it.
Thanks for that, Alex. Alex, it's 5:15. Do you?
I know. I do realise. I do.
You do realise that.
So I've got 5 minutes that I think I can squeeze
Rangi,
out.
you get another
I have
comment.
to go.
Yeah, look, we were told by the PMO that to do the whole building up, tickety boo, 26.23 million. So if our big ultimate goal of having this shared new building fails, is the 15.4 going to be well spent in regards to jumping in with the 26.2, or to get to that 26.2 stage, is it going to cost us 30 in the end? Like just by doing this interim stuff, is it going to catch us out? Because obviously you're actually rolling the dice here.
I agree with you. And the biggest issue around that, Rangi, is that I'm certain you know that if you project package the whole thing, then you'll get a much more elegant construction process. It'll be cheaper than if you do it in dribs and drabs.
Yeah, that's right.
In a non-ideal stage. So
I'm not supporting this at all. So I'm just declaring that now.
You're not supporting it at all?
The 15.4, no, because I don't think it's been thought through.
I am.
That's my own view. You have to be here to vote.
Leslie?
I just want to say it focuses our minds on making the decision. So I won't say any more than that.
I think we should remember that this is basically a bookmark in the long-term plan. We may well end up doing something different if we make a different decision with respect to a different, we build something new, for example, or we have partners who, want to provide some alternative for us. So it is, but to put something in the long-term plan, which just says this is we believe is we must, if we stay in this building for the next 5 years, we're going to have to spend this amount. Doesn't mean we actually spend it. And I think given that we, two things, given that we have not quite a time out, but very little spending in the first couple of years, and given that within the first couple of years, we will then decide whether we are going to go to another building or whatever. For me personally, it makes it a little bit easier to make that easier to make what is actually quite a tough decision. But anyway, we'll.
I was just actually going to be able to say what you just said, Tom.
Sorry? Okay.
The chair, yes. So, no, totally agree with what you said. I mean, to have it there as the safety net and really for our staff, self-pay, make sure that the lights stay on for 5 years at least. But the thing is, you may not spend it.
I think another issue.
Or you may actually have another decision by then.
I think another issue is that I'm certain that staff, including Michael, are being forbearing in the sense that they are putting up with an unsatisfactory situation and the expectation that things are going to get better fairly soon as we spend that money. If staff are confronting a situation that there was nothing in the long-term plan, and that nothing was going to be done with this building, and because that would be the implication of putting nothing in the long-term plan. If that was the case, then I think we would get resignations, and we would, you know, not only that, but we would have senior staff, including Michael, you know, really having paused for thought about whether it can go in the way it is. Would that be right, Michael? Alan.
Comment, Chair.
Just to finish off, I'm just thinking that you're also talking about the same thing. To be fair, the wording here pretty much says what Rainie's saying.
Yeah.
So why not just add a couple of words in there to say that if maybe, you know, like just a couple of words to change it so that it does read more like this is the possibility that may be spent if, you know, blah blah blah, as opposed to you're doing it. Just change the wording a little bit.
I think it
And
may.
then it'll be
I
say
agree.
what you say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the wording I would maybe add, and it comes to the same thing actually, is to just be explicit that very little of that, a small proportion of that money would be spent in the first 2 years until a decision was.
You just say
looked
may
at.
be spent between blah blah blah. Yeah. Just a may be in there. I don't know.
Where does the word may be?
Yeah, it's not really.
Wouldn't we be in a position, or shouldn't we be aiming to be in a position around if there's an alternative that's explored in the next 12 months, and we're pretty, you know, firm on that's the preferred option. I don't think we want to be waiting for 2 years for that. We either need to nail that there is another option or there isn't, and get on with it.
Yeah.
But whether it's 1 year or 2 years, we've got to firm up in a long-term plan in the next month or two, and if we put nothing in the long-term plan, it becomes very difficult to actually spend that money, doesn't it? If we find that we have to.
Through yourself, Chair, I'll probably go back to Rhiannon's timetable in relation to this going through the consultation audit process. This is the stage where you're approving what goes forward to audit for review to go into your consultation document. You still have a decision point should anything change between now and that point, which is if you have new information at the table, which we haven't got at this stage, that would change the direction in relation to that, and you might have other options, then you would be able to put that forward into that consultation. We'd need to take that through with audit, but that would be one of the proposals. And also you've got that other option, which is something happens during the consultation process before we get to June, and you have a final option available at that stage, then you could put that through into the final documentation. But we don't have anything in that shape or form at this stage to be able to put into any of the documents. So therefore what we have to put in is what is that holding component to get us through to that point. And that's what needs to be into our original initial consultation component. That's what we're seeking as part of E. We would hope that we might have something further by the time we get through that process to take to the community or as part of the deliberations process. But I say we're not in that stage at this point.
Thank you. Patricia, you're looking to say something? You're holding the microphone very...
I've just checked the budget. The bulk of that 15.4 is actually in years 3 and 4 of the long-term plan. Right. So it is quite light in year 1 and 2.
Could we perhaps then, I mean, I think that's the answer. So could we perhaps add to that paragraph a note that very little of money, I don't know if very little is the right word, what's the best word, that the bulk of that spending will be years 3 to 5?
That is what the budget already has in it. Yeah. So it has over 14 million of that.
I'm just trying to give councillors, including me, comfort that there is actually, that is, because that's, we're approving.
We'll just put as per budget.
If it's going to satisfy councillors to have those few words in there, it could be as simple as what Councillor Dermody's just suggested, as per budget.
As per budget. See.
Okay, so we'll do some wordsmithing on that. We're not actually approving it at this stage. We're coming back to do that, so we can move on while that thinking's going on. So, Rhiannon, the land sale, approach to land sale.
Yes, so council has discussed through various committees different portions of potential land that could be considered for disposal or optimisation. We're forecasting a conservative amount within the budget. Just 2 points to note. The first is that these numbers will need to be reviewed by a valuer, and that may change them, and that will be completed ahead of the long-term plan being adopted. And the second point is just to note that these estimates have been included for the purposes of budgeting. It does not preempt or preclude the decision-making process that council will make for each of these parcels of land individually. It is a composite forecast and should not be taken as having council made determination to actually sell. It is a forecasting element.
Thank you, Dan.
So I have an issue with this, in that it's vague enough that you can't really identify what blocks of land are being talked about, and that's fine. But the thing is, and amongst some of those that are being considered are constraints around how the money can be used. So for us to be able to say in F that it'll be used to reduce borrowings is not kosher. Because in some cases it might not be able to be used to reduce. Yeah, so to
So
reduce
it may become
borrowings,
available, but it's how you use it. Whereas there you're determining your use, aren't you?
yeah.
So you would propose changing it to be used in accordance with the requirements of. I'm not quite sure of the word. You can propose word, but
Well, it depends on the block of land.
It doesn't.
Yes.
Some of them
Well,
may be unencumbered, but some of them may have restrictions.
Do you need the state of use in the long-term plan?
So the reason it was included, and then Patricia may want to add more, is to state how it has been modelled to reduce council's net debt position.
Okay.
so could we? Well, could we then say this reflects how it is modelled in how it will be modelled in the budget, but recognising that there will be constraints over how the money is actually allocated.
Well, look, even if it's we add to reduce borrowings where permissible, that covers it off.
Michael.
Through yourself, Chair, I would actually recommend you just remove the words "to be used to reduce borrowings," because it's how it's actually used is in accordance with the requirements of each individual land site, and it doesn't actually add or subtract in relation to the modelling and how you model it.
Okay, okay with that.
Yeah, that's cleaner.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that one? So, and if not, we'll go to G.
So G relates to addition of a special dividend from ICHL. So this would be in addition to the signalled request through the letter of expectation of the 5.2 million, which is the core dividend. This would be a special dividend, 4 million a year across 10 years of the long-term plan, and would be included in an amendment to the letter of expectation.
Questions of Rhiannon?
So, sorry. So that's modelled in the budget. Obviously, that's what's 4 years or 10 years.
That was the direction from the workshop, as I understand it. It's 4 over 10 to be held on term deposit to allow that revenue generation that we need to meet the benchmarks.
That's interesting.
Okay with that, Graham?
Yeah. Well, so how would that implicate the letter of intent to Holdco?
We would give them an update.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. They are aware of the direction.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, next one.
I mean, this reflects the intention that's already been signalled that we look at the portfolio and Holdco and whether we can and at budget. I mean, we may do different things with that money when we receive it, but something's going to be assumed for planning purposes.
Yeah.
So this is the approach that's been taken for planning purposes. Whether that's actually what we end up doing, I think is I think becomes a matter of debate. Michael, is that fair? We're not tied by.
Through self-chair, this is giving an indication through to the holding company as part of the long-term plan process that's what we would be anticipating. We would place on them to try and achieve over the 10 years. What we did indicate to during the workshop was if we received all of that in a one lump from our perspective in 1 year, does not meet our requirements in relation to revenue over the 10 years. So it's counterintuitive to our actual revenue splits that we need to achieve from a council, and it's seen as better to hold the investment and get the return on an annual basis. Still same outcome for us and same revenue.
So just another question, Chair. So should it be additional dividend as opposed to special dividend? Additional dividend of 4 million over 10 years, because that, thinking through that, it may be that they, through optimisation of portfolio, they can achieve additional increase in dividend without a special dividend, and special dividend is different. It suggests it's more one-off than actual recurring income.
I think that's probably a moot point for the wording, whether it's a special dividend. They recognise that it would be additional on top of the 5.1, and that's what we're trying to get through. We're just calling it a special dividend so that it differentiates it from their standard dividend to us, which has already been signalled through the letter.
In terms of public consultation, it could be interpreted as, okay, well, why is it different to an increase in dividend as opposed to special? Because special dividend have different connotations.
We can probably work through that at consultation. It wasn't.
So I think, I understand what it means, and you understand too, Grant. It's more a matter of, is it open to misinterpretation?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm.
And I think that comes to, rather than what we're approving today, I don't think it's easy to be misinterpreted.
Yeah, right.
But what actually goes out in consultation document maybe needs to be, the wording needs to be crafted. It may end up with the same wording, but we just need to question, what the wording should be. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of the
sorry.
points two. Rangi.
Oh, just a quick question on G.
Sorry.
If we don't go ahead with that, it totally derails, say, item 9. We can't. This is all what we carry on to next is based on us agreeing to G. Is that correct? That 4 million per year over 10 years.
It means that the budget would be based on that presumption.
Yeah, it is.
But if you look at every point A, G above that, it's exactly the same. We may end up not doing it. We may end up not
but that one
the
there is especially a special one.
That's a significant amount of money. Yeah.
If that was not agreed, that would have we couldn't actually agree 9 because it would be a very different number.
Correct.
As a result.
And
I think, in front of it or something.
Sorry, Rang. I think the other thing that I would say in that though too is that we have already included in letter of expectation wording that kind of adds up to. It's not like we're pulling it out of thin air. Sorry, Leslie, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say it might help if G just had the words added to it after term deposit to reduce the net debt position, because that's what we're talking about, and that's what the further information already says, so why not just add those words? It makes it perfectly obvious. That's the effect.
I think it does clarify it to add those words. It's not It's not really the point that Rangi was making, but I think that they would be helpful words.
Well,
Rangi's point is, what if it doesn't happen?
Well, what I'm saying is that actually does clarify Rangi's point to some extent, because it makes it perfectly obvious we're talking about reducing the net debt position. As part of our financial strategy, which is what 9 is about. So actually putting those words quite openly in G just spells it out.
So
if we don't pass G, then yes, we're re-looking at 9.
So we go back then to, I think, the issue we've done quite a amount of work on. Most of them, if not all of them. Point A, I think, was the one which was
change around.
The one where Alex suggested that we leave to the end and she's no longer here. That one is a kind of yes or no, isn't it? Rather than, there's not a lot of fiddling with the words in that one. Sorry, Rang, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd just say, it's an obvious yes. We don't have the staff here or the information to wriggle whether it could be 850 or whatever.
I don't think it's a matter of the exact amount of money. I think it's more whether we see that as a project that we'd want, given that we haven't actually seen it before.
I say yes, we need to do it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. I have total faith in the staff that is here for a reason.
Can I just ask, just by show of hands, who agrees that project should be done?
Agrees.
Agrees?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. So in that case, I think we can probably take all of those items, excepting, Rangi, that I know that there's one that you would wish to vote against, which is this building, I think, wasn't it? But we can take all of them, and you can, vote against.
No,
if you
doesn't
want.
it?
No. Okay.
I'm happy to move 1 and 2 of the recommendations just to get us moving.
Say that again.
I'm happy to move 1 and 2 of the recommendations.
Right, you mean 1 and 2, not the A and B.
Receiving the report and agreeing to A to G.
Okay. So given
with the amendments we've made.
Given the modifications to wordings that we have already discussed, and assuming that that's part of the motion, is there somebody who will second that we approve those? Thanks, Darren. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. So that takes us through to number 3.
I'm happy to move 3A.
Right. Am I right in thinking that these are options that we go to public with without making a recommendation about one or t'other?
Correct. The last one is purely for the public to decide, tell us, do they prefer a blue bin or not a blue bin?
Okay.
It's a consultation thing.
Okay,
that's right.
but the point I was making is that the council is not recommending one or the t'other. We just put the two equal options.
Well, we've said one is the preferred option.
Yeah. I need a preferred option for both 3 and 4. What the preferred option does is it signals to the community the option council is leaning towards, and it is the one that is included in the budget.
The preferred option is?
The preferred option is included in the budget. So you have already had various discussions around the glass bins, and you have already signalled that your preferred option is the blue bin, which is why I've taken the liberty of putting that wording into there. The 2 options that are presented for you had not been costed up previously, so they're now presented here. Option 1 to introduce a new fortnightly glass bin collection service is estimated to be a 0.84% rates increase. That would be a level of service increase. It does require obviously investment in the bins themselves. It requires investment in the truck to collect the bins, and it requires operational increase. Option 2, if you don't introduce the glass bins, and the officers, as you'll see in the paper, are signalling that they expect the contractor to withdraw services in 2025. So if you went for preferred option 2, for example, the budget would remain unchanged for year 1, but then from year 2 onwards, the change would be implemented. Essentially, the community's options would be either to not recycle glass and put it into the red bins, and therefore the team have forecast the operational increases required through the extra weight of collecting all that glass, or bottle banks.
All right. So just to be clear, which have we assumed in the calculations that we've done in terms of rates so far?
Option 1 is in the budget at present.
Right. So can I ask Rangi, and this is your area more than anybody else's, do you wish to propose option 1? Is that your...
Yeah, I think that's the option, as long as of the understanding that we've got the bins, we've got the collection service, but the end user of the glass, or where it ends up, what happens then? Is that what we had the presentation on, about the person turning it into a fine substrate, or because obviously that must have been costed as well to do 0.84. You've got to have it's got to go somewhere.
It's a really good point, Councillor. So through you, Chair, in the body of the report is more detail in terms of the wording that at this point we intend to provide to the community. There is an estimate of the current amount of glass that we believe is reused. And then there is a forecast on the amount of glass that we believe has potential to be reused under option 1. So that would be an increase from about 60 to 70% at the moment to potentially 90%. It does rely on there being a contractor to be available to actually use that glass. And that obviously is something that will is subject to economic forces, just like the issue of the first contractor not being able to receive glass. If that came to a situation that there was no New Zealand market for the glass, it would need to be offshored.
But I'm saying we have been told, and we've had a presentation to council of an intended user.
Yeah, we have. Any other questions of Rhiannon?
Just with the glass, when McGregor Concrete
Well,
willing to take the glass.
yeah, that's
So we are asked to confirm that the following consultation options, and particularly noting that option 1 is the preferred option, which Rangi has spoken to. Will somebody move that? Barry? Oh, Leslie's already had. Okay, we'll take Barry's a seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Number 4.
So number 4 speaks to the issue of the elderly person's housing activity that's been discussed at a number of points through the year. I will just speak to the reason for the changing in the wording on option 1. So as I mentioned earlier, the rating model is the last part to be completed. That rating model is quite complex, so there is potentially flux in that 0.5%. The exact amount of the rates increase will depend on the repayment profile that's put in place for the capital and the interest. That may be appropriate to profile that differently to some other capital within the program, given the nature of the activity. So that is the part that's still to be finalised. So just to signal that this is very likely to change slightly through the audit process. At present, it's modelled at 0.3 in year 1, and then it declines slowly over time. So it's like 0.3 in year 2, etc. We are expecting that to come down a certain amount, but the important part to take away is that this is on top of the rates increase in the recommendation 9 earlier down. So the question that you asked earlier about which option was in for glass, at present, option 2 is what is in the budget, but we are not, obviously it is, I do not know what council's preferred option is. I need to understand that from you, and we will change the budget as required. There will be a rates increase for option 1 as we've signalled. We expect it to be 0.5 or less.
Okay, questions of Rhiannon? Rhiannon, I'll ask a question. Oh, sorry, you got it. Grant. Yeah,
So
Grant,
just
you go.
trying to work out, so the rates increase of 0.5% on the basis of the capital of 7 million. So that's amortisation is the cost of the rates, and the rates increases in relation to the amortisation of the loan.
To fund the repayment of the loan and the interest cost on that.
What's the amortisation term?
We've done it over 30 years.
So that's what, half the useful life, isn't it? Okay.
I think when council discussed this, council in workshop, we discussed this. I think one of the issues that was mentioned was that while current policy is to have the current tenants fund any work going forward, that there is nothing comes from general rates. For me, a point that was made that is important is the fact that those current tenants don't actually benefit at all from the building of. It's the generation which is younger that benefits from it, and I was a general ratepayer by and large. So to me, that's the that's the argument that it's got some force with me. The other issue was if there is nothing in the LTP, there is no capital in the LTP, then if there were an opportunity to apply to government for funding, and if there was any need to match fund, it would not be possible to have any bucket to take money from to help. Michael, was that the case, or have I got that wrong?
No, through yourself, Chair, that is correct. If there's no funding available for capital investment, then we wouldn't be in a position to match fund in relation to that, noting that you would also be increasing that number by the value of the land and the buildings that you would put into the overall number.
So if there was an opportunity to get money for 50 homes or something like that, which might be, $25 million, it could be that even having put in money for infrastructure and for and the value of the land, there might be some shortfall. And one of the thinkings were that if there was a approved amount of money like this $7 million, that might, at 7 million might get us 25. I think that was the part of the logic, wasn't it, Leslie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I suppose this one I thought was an important one to put the propositions or the options to the public for that feedback. Until now, the feedback has generally been public of Invercargill are very happy that we're in housing and want us to stay in housing for elderly, but have said funded our rates. We now need to know what is the appetite now from the public, considering the climate for housing, the known need, the ongoing population needs of the Invercargill population, all those things we've put in the long-term plan. What is the appetite for actually getting the indication now? Has the public of Invercargill now changed to where we'll get the feedback that says, yes, put in some ICC capital funding because it's really important for the future of this Invercargill? And I think the time has come for us to ask that question. If we're going to be serious about our units, we know that there is a large number of them built in the 50s that need replaced pretty soon. So let's ask the question.
Thank you. Grant.
Yeah. I wonder if this is an opportunity for us to look at where we will commit to this if the government equally commits to it. And we know very well that the tax share between local government and national government is inadequate. This to me is no different to how we fund emergency housing, which we don't. We expect the government to do it, and they don't do a very good job. So why are we putting this additional burden on ratepayers when it's really it's part of a government proposal? Either they fund it themselves directly from central government and from tax pool, or they share more equally tax.
So, Grant, are you suggesting we could reframe option 1 to refer to
a JV or
funding?
yeah. And
I suppose one of the negatives on that is that if you include it in there, then you guarantee the government would expect us to, put in the 7 million, whereas at the moment it's written in a way that isn't necessarily how it would be used. At the moment it's put in as to support the building of an extra 4 units.
Well, effectively it's an extra. Effectively it's 4 replacements plus 4 new ones.
So it's 8 in total.
So it's 8
7 million.
total.
It's 8 in total.
That's expensive.
So what you're saying, Grant, I think, is that it should be written in a way that it's a requirement that there be some contribution.
Any investment made by ratepayers is equally matched by central government.
So
that's a big ask.
I know it's a big ask, but it points to reality.
We run the risk.
The 4 and 4 is slightly incorrect. It's actually replacing units so that we end up by the end with 220. So that is recognising that how we have modelled it is that 7 million is used to replace the oldest units first, but trying to increase the number of units on those sites so that by the time we get to the end, we've got 220. So that's what the general modelling is. I would, as has been suggested, if there was government funding, it does mean we have already got some capital funding sitting in our long-term plan that we could participate in. Without it, we would be in a much more difficult position should something come along.
It seems like one of those issues where we could have, because we've got the time for the finalised wording, this could be another one of those where we could adjust the option wording. If we get an indication in the next 6 months that the government might very well be looking at assisting councils with building new housing, that would be an interesting point at which to change these options.
Because clearly, and I've said this before, but clearly you cannot expect the existing elderly tenants to fund the next generation of increased number of houses. That was, completely contrary to any kind of logic. Sorry, Alan. Yeah.
I was just going to say, should we perhaps have a third option in there and look at the possibility of should we actually be involved in this? Because to be fair, even with the number we have got, we're only looking after a very small number of our local community, yet the entire community is funding it. Now, I'm not saying it's something that is a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it is actually, as Grant said, it's a central government issue, really, as opposed to a local government. So, in fact, should we have an option in there to see if people would like us to actually leave the space and move out of it? Have a third option.
And have homeless.
No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't agree with that.
So, Rhiannon, before
So to those two previous questions, I've through you, Chair, if I speak to Councillor Arnold's suggestion first. Council did give direction back in May that you wish to stay in the elderly person's housing activity and wished options prepared on that basis. So you could reverse that decision now, but it would put us in a really difficult position in terms of finalising options ahead of consultation. It would be extremely difficult. Because there's a whole, like when you change and you remove yourself out of an activity, that's a whole nother process and it's complex. So I would say we are really too late to do that in a robust way. Speaking to the point around saying we would only proceed if we got matched government funding, if the audit process proceeds as it normally does, we would not be able to proceed with that. Audit requires us to fund what we have in the plan. Where we note we are expecting external funding, we would have to provide evidence as to what we believe that would be applied to and note that we would underwrite it anyway. These are the consultation options. To Councillor Soper's point around the wording, I think that it would be appropriate to put some wording in the supplementary information, noting that council, is going to take the feedback of the community and take this into account when it makes its final decisions. Ultimately, when you make the final decision, you can shift and change based on new information. That happened last long-term plan, for example. We consulted on 2 museum options, and by the time it got to the decision making, actually council said we do want to look at a new building. So that is a possible and appropriate.
I think that is an important point, isn't it? This is putting a marker in the budget, placeholder in the budget for an amount of money. Before that money can be spent, a paper would have to come back to council, wouldn't it? So, at that point, Grant, you get the opportunity. I mean, this is putting money in, the paper would need to come back saying we want to build 4 houses or whatever, and it could be that council would support or not support. Is that the case, Michael?
And we would also have the community consultation giving us the community's up-to-date view.
Through yourself, Chair, I just want to highlight, I've heard the number 4 bantered a lot, and you see the 4 on there. It's actually 20 new houses with 16 being decommissioned. That's what you get 4 out of. Hence, if you do the sums, then you end up with a very expensive house. But actually, it's 20 new and 16 shifting into those new houses. Only 4 new.
Okay, that's an important point.
So you're going to go to the vote around which option?
I think that's probably
the preferred option.
I think that's probably. Look, I think the third option I mean, we could if you want, Alan, but I'm pretty sure that it's not going to get up because we debated it last time, and it was
just a
yeah. I know that that's your view.
just throw it out there.
So I will put hands up those who would support option 1.
It's the preferred option.
It's the preferred option.
As a preferred option.
Yeah.
Okay. So look, I think the majority would support option 1. So I think in that case that becomes the preferred option.
Move her in a second to do that.
Okay, so we'll do that at this stage then.
Are
Would
we,
somebody
are we
move that?
conflicted because
Pardon?
we're getting older?
Pardon?
Are we conflicted because I'm getting older?
There are criteria.
Who's we?
There are
Who's we exactly?
So am I taking it that you're moving, Ranga, that we, I don't mean moving in the elderly house, I mean, are you moving that we have option A as the preferred option?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. Will somebody second it? Thanks, Barry. Two of the oldest people in the room, that's highly surprising. I'll third it if it's required. Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you.
Come on.
Number 5.
And then we're moving 4 altogether because the 2 options are then moved.
Yep.
It's
Yes.
consultation, so we need to now move 4 together.
Okay, so
I'll move 4.
I'll second.
thank you. Those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Number 5.
Move.
Second.
Hold on, let's just
Basically,
look
just
at it
says
first.
that
Second.
No, council will receive fees and charges for adoption by council. Okay, so you'll move it. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Leslie. All those in, is it? All those in
Aye.
favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Number 6. Okay, confirm the following changes can be made to the financial assumptions. So has council seen those before, or are these? I don't recall these ones. Did we workshop
We
those?
had our workshop with.
Yeah, so if I can just really briefly speak to 5, just to note that there are increases in the fees and charges in line with the rates increase and with cost increases. So any changes that you make in January to significant revenue lines could impact the budget. So just to flag that, but that will be brought back in detail in January. On number 6, these are the financial assumptions that you have received. I think Deputy Mayor, you made a wee joke at the time that I might have sent the paper to every committee that I could find, which I did indeed do. So risk and assurance, infrastructure, community wellbeing, and council have all received the assumptions, and that just reflects how important they are, which Andrew has spoken about many times from a risk management point of view as well as a budgeting point of view. So these are the adjustments to the financial assumptions. They just note the changes in the interest rates and inflation based on new information becoming available. They are not massive changes, but they are small, important changes that have big flow through impact to the budgets. Patricia would be able to speak more if you want anything on the detail on A and B. C just simply notes the point that you've confirmed above, that we will include the land sales as a forecasting assumption that's necessary for audit, and D the same thing. So it's really just a technical adjustments to the assumptions.
Okay, any questions of Rhiannon on those? Will somebody move that we confirm those?
Yeah.
I'm happy
Thanks,
to move
Grant
6
and
and
Rhea
7.
Pardon?
6 and 7.
Well,
7 was just...
I'll do 6 first. You just confused me. So, Grant and Rhea, I think, moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
6,
Aye.
say aye. Against? Carried. Number 7, note that further changes are likely to be required to assumptions as a result of central government regulatory changes. Okay, Leslie, do you want to move that
Yeah,
one?
I'll move that because it's just
And yeah,
practical.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder? Thanks, Rhea. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Number 8.
So 8 speaks to changes that we're recommending to the financial strategy as a result of further direction that's come from council over the last few meetings. So the first deals with the appropriate funding level for depreciation. So further work's been done by the infrastructure and finance teams to look into the detail in terms of the depreciation profile for the different asset classes. We'd signalled earlier that this would come through. It has quite a significant budgetary impact, so it's provided there. again, Patricia can answer any questions as necessary on A. B deals with the proposed debt cap, which has been discussed by Council many times through this year. You'll recall at present the debt cap is 150% of revenue. It also speaks to the issue that the Chief Executive raised earlier in terms of us providing debt room for ICHL. It's the advice of officers that it's appropriate to raise that debt cap to 180% in those early years of the plan and 200% in the second 4 years before declining again to 190%. What that will do is it deals appropriately with the capital bow wave that we have coming in terms of asset replacement in our core infrastructure. It enables on the advice of Officers Council to remain prudent in terms of its approach to managing debt whilst expanding it at the rate needed to fund the capital program. It still allows that headroom for the capital call from ICHL. Point C relates to the position that we believed we would need to be in terms of providing all information within the financial strategy for Three Waters in and out. So there's a change in the proposed debt cap that you can see should Three Waters be out. The debt cap would need to be higher for 2 years, but then would remain the same. So it really just shows that Invercargill City Council is in quite a unique position in terms of being able to manage that debt headroom for its Three Waters program. D is about the adjustment that we're recommending to the rates increase limit benchmark. It was at 6% within the assumptions. We're recommending it increase to 7%. That is just to adjust for the likely rates increase as a requirement of the program that council has now finalised on. Point E just notes that we intend to provide all the net debt positions and benchmarks for both modelling options at this point, and that's dependent on the final negotiations with audit.
Okay, thank you. Questions to Rhiannon on those? If not, will somebody move that we confirm those changes to the financial strategy? Thanks, Darren. Seconded, Leslie. Is there any further discussion?
No.
If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of confirming all of A to E, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Number 9.
So number 9 will need an adjustment based on the decision above. So that would make the rates increase for 24-25 9.5%. Michelle, if you wouldn't mind putting the wording up to 9.5%, and we will come back to council as soon as the rating model is finished with the final figure.
Right, so what decision did we take that pushed up 0.5%?
The housing.
The housing one. Early.
As a preferred, so we have to put the preferred
option goes into the budget model, yep.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Rhiannon on that?
Move that.
If not, will somebody move? Thanks, Grant. And seconded, Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Takes us to number 10.
So you need to increase them.
So number 10, 11, 12 and 13 are all providing you just a picture of where we will be in terms of the financial position with Three Waters. So of that now 9.5% increase in 2024-25, 4.2% is to meet Three Waters costs, and it will be 5.3 to meet all other council activity costs.
Okay. So I'll deal with them one at a time though, Rhiannon. Any questions of Rhiannon on that?
So we have to adjust that to 9.5% again?
9.5.
To 9.5.
Okay. So again, are there any questions on that? If not, will somebody move that, well, it's for noting that we note item 10. Thanks, Leslie, and seconded, Darren. Any more discussion? All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Number 11.
So number 11 notes that on the basis of the modelled budget, council will need to expect to run an unbalanced budget for the first 4 years before returning to balance in 28-29. That's been produced following direction from council that would be a satisfactory approach. It does show a plan to return to a balanced budget, so it's the office of advice that's prudent.
Okay, any questions of Rhiannon on that one? And if not, will somebody move that we, thanks Grant, second and Rhea. Any other discussion on that point? No? Okay, all those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Number 12.
Number 12 is a technical point. It's just noting that one of the benchmarks, the essential services benchmark, breaches only in 1 year, in year 8, or no, yeah, in year 8, simply due to the timing of the capital program.
What is that timing? What is it?
It's simply to do with where the allocation of spend is within the program.
Yeah, it's a benchmark that is depreciation over replacement. It's just the way the depreciation's modelling at the moment.
Is there any, could I ask on that, and I mean it's a technical breach and I'm sure it's not the end of the world, but 10 years out I don't think we know very precisely what our capital spend profile is going to look like. How much of an adjustment to the profile would it take to actually eliminate that breach, and would it have other negative effects if we did so?
Haven't really tried to eliminate the breach. It was trying to get the timing right on the rest of the program was probably more important. We will have a look to see whether we can't eliminate it once
because
we go through
10 years out, we don't know exactly what the spend profile is going to be, and if there is a, you know, if there is a different spend profile that results in us not breaching, that would certainly be sensible. If there's no other negative knock-on effect. You're going to comment, Michael?
Yeah, through self-chair. I think the key component to this is there's some strategic projects in relation to the Three Waters aspects in that particular period, which means there's a lot of work happening in those spaces, but they're not deemed in the essential services component. They're more deemed in strategic works. It's kind of a nuance in relation to the work spend, so we're actually spending more in that year in those areas than but it's not something from a benchmarks point of view we can alter. We can't shift something from one category to the other. But we are still spending at the heightened level during that period for those services. So it is just a categorisation issue.
Is that why it's breached? Because we're spending more than
Yes, correct.
Right.
So I don't think we can change the modelling component of it to make it work.
No, fair enough. I mean, if it was $10 or something, no. But I mean, if it's a couple of million or something,
no, it is quite a significant breach. Okay. And we have spent.
I think we might
a couple of hours looking at it.
I think we might have to get it audited.
It's more than $10.
That's the deputy mayor's view. We might need to get it audited.
Can I just say that far out, I'm not sure that we should ask staff to look at the question of the forecast breach any further. Because the potential that far out is that we have made a very significant capital decision about a new building, which in itself is going to change the potential capital spend in those out years. So I'm not sure it's worth asking staff to look particularly at this one at the moment, when we know from our discussions that we've probably got another major capital issue that's.
It speaks to the robustness of the way the
look, that's fine. Leave it at that. So we are asked to note that. Well, if there's no other questions, will somebody move that we note that? Thanks, Grant, and seconded Rhea. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Number 13.
So that's very self-explanatory. It's just confirming that 2 of the other important benchmarks will be met through all 10 years of the plan.
Okay. Any other questions? So, Grant, you moving or you asked?
I'll move it. Yeah.
I'll second it.
You move, and Barry seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Number 14.
So 14 deals with the policies that are required to be updated in line with the financial strategy. So A and B must be updated every LTP. The changes to the draft revenue and financing policy are noted within the body of the report. Essentially, the revenue and financing policy outlines how we will fund council's activities in line with the financial strategy. So it notes a change of the funding source for operating expenses to include borrowing. It notes a change to the structure of the funding for activities to note the change of the preferred option for housing. So we will adjust that now. We are just also making some changes to the way that the document is worded to make it a little bit easier to use. So changing the funding mechanism table for the activities to include percentages, which will be easier rather for managers to use to make sure that when they set their fees and charges, it's in line with the revenue and finance policy. And we are noting the proceeds from asset sales as a forecast for capital expenditure. So essentially it's just really enacting the decisions that you've made earlier on through the process.
I have a question on it, Rhiannon. On 15A, where we say there's no changes recommended to these required policies, actually, if you look at that policy, it says it's for consultation. So in other words, it's worded, the front page is worded, is the same as Area D in number 14.
So sorry, are you talking about 15A?
I'm talking about 15A.
That's an error, so I'll need to work out why that's happened. We don't need to consult on the rates postponement and remissions policy.
Okay. Had you already noticed that, had you?
No, but I am taking note of it right now.
Take my word for it. It does. Okay, Alan.
I have to go, Chair.
Pardon?
I have to leave.
Okay then.
Apologies, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so number 14, we'll take all of them at the same time, I think. Has anybody got any questions on those of Rhiannon?
I'll move.
You'll move? Is there a seconder? Thanks, Dan. Is there any other discussion of those? And if not, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And number 16 we have already dealt with, I think. Have we already moved and seconded?
Number 15. Number 15, sorry.
Mr. Chair, you've just done number 14.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
14 to 16.
Okay, number 15, are there any questions?
So you
move,
aye.
and seconded by Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
But
Carried.
shouldn't that be
And
considered?
Mr. Chair, you do need to do number 16. We have done number 17.
Okay.
It's just the
Oh, so we have
policy
to.
that's wrong.
So number 16, delegate to the Group Manager Finance and Assurance to make non-significant corrections and amendments. Any questions around that one?
Move.
And if not, then will somebody move that we do that? Thanks, Dan. Seconded. Leslie. Any other discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we did do number 17, didn't we?
Number 17.
Done number 17. Thank you. Okay, well, sorry it takes so long in that paper, but it's an important paper, and I think it was important that we spent the time. Okay, Rhiannon, the next one is in your name as well.
Okay, so this paper provides you with all of the draft asset and activity management plans, and it notes the some minor changes to the KPIs which you had received earlier in the process. It notes following change. Sorry, it notes recommended change under 4 to the infrastructure assumptions. So that's around the capital delivery forecasts, which are now have been refined marginally from what you received earlier. And it confirms changes under 6, noting that we will bring through all the changes in the budgets that you've made at this meeting and flow those through into the asset and activity plans where that needs to be done. Sorry, to the infrastructure strategy, and addition of 2 alternative capital investment 10 years forecasts, one inclusive of Three Waters and one exclusive of Three Waters. Perhaps it's worth noting that B will only be done if required by audit, which we are now not certain as of today it will be required.
Okay. So this paper has got a large number of appendices. I think all of these plans pretty much fall out from what we have already previously agreed. So I'm minded to take them all at the same time, if everybody's comfortable with that. But are there any questions of Rhiannon first?
Good work.
If there's no questions, will somebody move that we approve, is that the word, that we approve all of those plans?
Yep.
Somebody moves, thanks Barry. Seconded by Grant. Is there any other discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. So that concludes, oh no it doesn't, we've got a delayed item.
Delayed item, yes.
Delayed item, which is to receive, which receive I think is a word, doesn't it? We're not approving anything, to receive the...
Receive and then approve.
Okay. To receive and approve the recommendations from the Finance and Projects Committee. So we are receiving the minute.
Receiving the report
Receiving
that
the
brings forth the recommendation.
Receiving the report and approving the recommendation. It's from you, Michael, is it? You want to say this?
Yes, no, it is in my name simply because my team are responsible for the minute administration, and as we've said earlier, while Michelle is good, she can't turn the minutes around quite that fast. So this is the paper that's been tabled, if you're trying to just follow what's happening. It's the recommendation that came through from Finance and Projects earlier this afternoon.
So I'll move.
You'll move? Is there a seconder? Thanks, Ria. Is there any other discussion? Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That concludes the public session of Council. Rangi, you got comment?
Well, I just want to raise the issue, and it's important that we are only just a quorum at the moment of council, and we are running, but the risk of that not actually meeting with the various people leaving, and the business that we have in front of us is, just think we're running too close to the wire.
Only if somebody leaves.
Yeah, no, but
Then
we are good now at 7 out of 13, but I'm just saying it does prove a risk that I think we need to be slightly more aware of, considering what we've had to debate. And if we were unable, because of the failure to reach quorum, not to go through the substantive motions we've just passed, we aren't functioning.
Okay, so your point's well made, Rangi.
Yeah, so I just want to put that on record, really.
No, thank you. Can I ask then, before we do move into public excluded, whether anybody's imminently going to run?
Depends on whether you're 12 o'clock tomorrow.
What time?
I've got a meeting, but I'm...
Okay, so we probably get half an hour or so to go at the very most.
Yeah.
So if everybody's okay with that, then thanks for pointing it out, Rangi, because it would have been embarrassing if we had suddenly found ourselves without a quorum. Well, thank you for...
It's okay.
Pardon?
I can stay for another reading.
Okay, so that does conclude the public session. Will somebody move that we move into, thanks Leslie, seconded Darren. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. So that ends the live